You're listening to the Dr. Toby Out On Call video podcast with yours truly, Dr. Toby. I am a clinical psychologist traveling from Miami to Hollywood, providing serious and entertaining expertise in mental health. I've helped governments and courts, local and far, while running my real estate development and business holding company. I've been investing in helping people for decades, and this is Dr. Toby Out On Call. Hi guys, welcome to the Dr. Toby Out On Call video podcast. I am coming to you live from Sedona. Actually, it's not live, but oh well, that's okay. I'm coming to you from Sedona, Arizona. I've never been here before, and it's my pleasure to introduce my first guest ever while I'm in control of the production of this video podcast. So she was the feature of a documentary. She's kind of a community screening specialist that goes throughout the country. The film is called Medicating Normal. It's a wonderful film. I haven't seen the full film yet, but I did get to see a little bit of a trailer of it. I've read about it. So please welcome to the show, Angela Peacock.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Glad to hear that you're here. And I've known about your work for a while. But why don't you share with our audience and let them know a little bit about yourself and about the movie that is coming out. And I don't know where it's going to be seen, if they have to Google it and find it, but let our audience know a little bit about it.
Sure. So my name is Angela. Basically my story is that I was a military veteran. I was deployed to Iraq in 2003, right after the start of the war. And I quickly became very ill from some kind of environmental things that were happening and all the stress that was occurring. And I was medically evacuated out. And when I came out, I went straight to psychiatry to get help, because I thought that's what you do.
Okay.
And I was immediately medicated. And it turned out to be, I was given more than 40 medications in a 13-year period.
Oh my gosh.
So at the peak, I was on 18 at the same time.
So you were on 18 different medications at the same time?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that somebody could be on 18 medications at one time. And for the most part, these were all psychiatric medications that you were taking?
Mostly psychiatric drugs and opiates a little bit. And then of course it turned from my original post-traumatic stress disorder now it's major depression. Now it's panic disorder with agoraphobia, and then I have stomach problems and headaches. So there's more and more medications to treat all the side effects. Okay. So then it turned into like, what's my original condition and what is a side effect? What are we treating here?
Sure. So I just did an interview with Miss Wisconsin, and she is a Marine, and I've learned that once a Marine, always a Marine. And what you were in what?
I was in the Army, so I was a soldier, but we say that former Army Sergeant Angela Peacock.
Okay.
We say former Army.
All right. Yeah. So I quickly learned that once a Marine, always a Marine, though. And so she kind of informed me about that, and we had a nice conversation about the veterans that are coming out of the Department of Defense, active military, and again she was very open. I was very surprised actually by her interview, that she was like, we shouldn't be calling this PTSD. Yes, this is a normal reaction to extreme situations that people shouldn't be going through. I mean, we used to call it war syndrome or combat syndrome, or there's a lot of different words that they've used, but calling it a disorder medicalizes it. It kind of puts a stigma to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of veterans and people don't like.
And that's part of my story, is that I realize now, after coming off of all the medication and looking back, that my reaction was absolutely normal, and I should never have been medicated in the first place.
Yeah.
And now imagine thinking back, and like the last 13 years of my life are erased because I was under the influence of all these psychiatric drugs and like unable to even make my own decisions. Like there should have been some alarm bell that said like something's wrong with you're on 18 medications.
Yeah.
But like that ability was not even.
Yeah.
It wasn't in there.
So tell me a little bit about how you got connected with the movie, Medicating Normal. And I keep wanting to say, Saving Normal, which was, Alan Francis came out with a book, and, our audience members may or may not know about that. But there does seem to be kind of a pendulum swinging the other way a little bit, where we were heavily medicating people with psychiatric meds. Everyone was diagnosed. I mean, we still have 1 in every 5 Americans taking a psychiatric medication right now. In some communities, it's actually a lot worse than that. Yeah. In some communities with children, it's 100% of kids, like in Medicare or Medicaid program, where they're being medicated. And so I was actually surprised when Alan Francis, and for those of you who don't know, he was quote unquote the most important psychiatrist in the world. He was in charge of the book that doctors like I use to diagnose. I mean, he's the guy who was the chair of that committee for the DSM-4. And now he's even come out saying, you know what, we're really taking normal responses to people like veterans, like children that, you know, are struggling, and we're medicalizing it, we're pathologizing it, and we're drugging it, and we're doing it for profit. So how did you get involved with the movie, or how did that, you know, come together?
Yeah, so my waking up process was maybe 10 years ago. I started to write down, and I said, okay, they said, Angie, you have this extensive medication history, like you were a bright, intelligent, you know, award-winning soldier, like this exemplary record, and you went to seriously mentally ill, like overnight. Like, we have to talk about this.
Yeah, to let others know. I mean, that's kind of the purpose of why, again, that's part of the purpose of why I have this show, you know, Dr. Toby Out On Call. We're addressing serious issues, you know, like mental health, veterans, and things like that. I also do goofy stuff too about, you know, dating relationships and, you know, touring mansions and yachts and all that other stuff. But we want to like actually try to help people learn about this, bring awareness to it, because there's a lot of people dying out there. I mean, it wasn't that many years ago. I was asked by the Bernie Sanders group actually, and Veterans on Mental Health committee, to go out and put research out there about why we had 22 veterans a day killing themselves, and they couldn't figure out why. And I highlighted that.
I know why, because I experienced it.
Yeah.
I as I was coming off the medication, as I was on the medication, if they changed a dose or added another medication, I would definitely get an increase in suicidal thoughts. Yeah. And as I was coming off that last drug, and that leads right into, I didn't want to do the film, but in a silly kind of way, my participation in the film like saved my life, because at that point I was like, I'm just gonna kill myself. I can't endure this suffering. But then I was like, well, I can't be in a film, and then they say this person died by suicide. So I live in the world of veterans and medication, and I get emails every day and they say I'm on 13, I'm on 15.
Does it feel a little overwhelming?
My doctors won't help me. Yes, because it's like you're going against this machine that we think mental health treatment works, and so you have to give more money to mental health treatment and get more veterans in mental health care treatment. But the statistics show that veterans under VA care die at a higher rate by suicide than veterans outside of care.
Right. And that's the sad part. And you know, I feel for you, and God bless you for doing it. You know, I've done this for quite a few years, and I originally started off in the neuropsychiatric world, trying to go as a neuropsychologist, and the research changed me into wanting to do more of, you know, clinical work. And then once I became an expert in research, I realized we need to start alerting the public to some of these dangers. And again, I'm not against medications wholeheartedly. I'm against misleading people. And there's a place for people, you know, if they want to take certain meds and they understand the risks and the benefits, that's great. That's informed consent. What we're talking about is that soldiers and people coming out of combat who aren't being given informed consent, who aren't aware of this. We have actually, I've been helping with legislation right now.
I'm familiar with that.
Yeah.
I get the emails.
Oh, okay.
From John?
Yeah, from John Spagnola.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're doing legislation right now to help basically veterans learn, and I forgot, that's right, we're all on the
same team.
You know, it's such a small community here, people. You gotta love it.
Yeah. But we should, like what he's saying is brought up in the film too about informed consent, that I wish I had an exit plan. I wish I was told, you know, you could experience an extreme withdrawal syndrome from this drug, that when we do a private community screening, we have this conversation where there's 100 people in the audience. Yeah. There's prescribers, psychologists, patients, ex-patients, people that have been harmed, people actively withdrawing. Right. And this conversation is unfolding like it's just not happening anywhere else. We don't have these conversations. That's right. You see your psychiatrist for 8 minutes, you get your prescription, you go home, you take it, you see your therapist for an hour. Nobody's talking to each other, nobody's talking about risks and side effects and withdrawal. So
well, again, and you're just, again, you know, you're, you know, kind of Joe Blow, you're, you know, kind of Angela, just, hey, I'm just a person who was in the Army, who kind of went through this, and you're seeing it, this is what's happening. This isn't like totally abnormal. You're just, I guess, brave enough to come out and speak about it, and also, I don't want to say lucky enough or fortunate enough to be the chosen one to maybe say, hey, we want to do this movie about what's happening, to let people know about it, which comes with a lot of responsibility and a lot of pain and suffering, because I get calls, you know, every week from people all over the country looking for help, and I'm always trying to find resources and trying to help them, but it can be overwhelming at times. It really can, and that's why I wanted this platform, so that we can kind of do that. So if somebody wants to reach out, support the movie, support the cause, you know, what's a good website that they could go to let them know, and, you know.
So www.medicatingnormal.com We have alternatives, resources, a reading list.
Can you say it one more time?
Medicatingnormal.com.
And the website address?
www.medicatingnormal.com. But also we have a YouTube channel with over 100 clips that were not included in the film. There's lived experience stories coming next week on Wednesday, but by the time you see this, they'll be out. But we also have Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, any of those things. You can find us everywhere.
Well, that's that's amazing, and I'm glad that you're doing it. I can't wait to see the full film. I flew into Sedona or Phoenix, drove up. I couldn't make the the premiere of it, but I sure did want to. But as long as I was here, I figured, I'm going to do a few interviews while I'm in Sedona. And I don't know if you know my next guest on the show, but I would like you to stick around. Can you stick around for a while?
Stick around, sure.
Okay. All right. So my next guest runs a treatment facility here in Sedona. It's called Alternative to Med Center. His name is Lyle Murphy, and I think I'll let him kind of do the introduction to it. But I know he's been around for many years. In fact, I've had patients throughout the country looking for help, and I've referred to them before in the past. I've had some people say that they've done an amazing job for them. It's a work in progress. I mean, we're all kind of a work in progress. Nobody's going to be perfect. But I think that the beauty is that they really are trying to be much more integrative of overall health, not just mental, but other physiological health, and the building blocks to get into orthomolecular stuff. But let's welcome Lyle Murphy to the show, and he can tell you a little bit more about what kind of work they're doing at the Alternative to Med Center. So, welcome, Lyle Murphy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good to see you.
You're such a magnificent interviewer. I feel only slightly intimidated.
Yeah, this is, again, people, this is the first one that I've ever done, where I've been in control, and I'm like literally the director, the producer, the host, the cameraman, the grip. I'm doing it all, and I'm going to continue to do this throughout the country. And again, that's the idea of Dr. Toby Out On Call. And right when we're done here, we're going to Vegas. So have you guys been to Vegas?
Yeah, I'm headed there next month.
Yeah, I heard it's a lot of fun.
We'll see.
You got to watch the episode on Vegas. I'm telling you, you're going to love it. It's going to be kind of wild and crazy.
If you were saying you were going to the jungle, then I'd be like, hey, I'm going to Vegas. I'm like,
yeah, you're not a
I'm
Vegas
not going to
guy.
go there right now.
No, wait a minute. Now, so I would think that you're the Vegas guy because you know what? You got the beautiful blue eyes. You got some blue hair going on, and I'm thinking, all right, most directors of a clinic, they look like me. They're kind of like clean cut. You wear the suit. It's kind of the typical doctor look, I guess. But I recognize that, just because people look a little different doesn't mean that they're not more intelligent, more effective. Because I hate to say it, a lot of doctors, I have patients come to me, they say, hey, I've been to 10 different doctors, I'm still not, finding help. And I'm like, you've been to 10 doctors, but they weren't different. Because they all come from the same philosophy, same ideology. And so I love it. I think the blue hair is wonderful, and I bet you your patients...
It's not even a statement about being different. My daughter's a cosmetologist.
Okay.
I was going to say I've been on the all blueberry diet or something silly, but
yeah,
my daughter's a cosmetologist, and one of the things that we champion here is non-toxic hygiene products.
Okay.
For a certain amount of the population, it is really the stuff they've been putting on their bodies or in their bodies through foods that can be poisoning them and throwing off the works of their neurochemistry.
Okay.
The brain is a biochemical organ. It will respond to subtle shifts in chemistry, especially chemicals that mimic neurotransmitters or mimic hormones, and a lot of those things are found in hygiene products. So we've implemented a layer of makeovers.
Okay.
So
it's like a biochemical kind of makeover.
Yeah, when people come into the program, we strategically take away the things that may be poisoning.
Yeah.
And trying to take away people's makeup products, it can be very, I don't know.
Well,
so we replace them with things that are, and we give them a makeover here with the non-toxic stuff. That
Absolutely.
is,
well, it's important because I recognize that organic makeup products are huge, and they're diving into that mainstream market. In fact, I know one of the interviews I'm going to be doing is with Miss Colorado, who happens to also be in Texas at one time, and she has a whole organic makeup line, and she owns a hemp farm of all things. So I know we're going to be going there shortly to interview her and the whole hemp products and whatnot. So when people come and find you, first of all, how do they find you? I mean, you're here in Sedona. It's a beautiful area, but it's not exactly the metropolis, major city like Phoenix or LA or Chicago. How do people find you?
By and large, people type in something on the internet that says something along the lines of, "I want to get off my X-Med,"
Okay.
Xanax withdrawal or
Okay.
Cymbalta alternatives or
Okay.
something like that.
And that's the kind of person that you'll actually have here, somebody who's on psychiatric meds, whether it be like a Cymbalta, you know, a kind of bipolar med or a stimulant med. Do you also work with medications like, you know, the opiates? That's a major issue with, I know, veterans. It's a major issue with pain management. Do you work with the opioid addiction
Yes,
problems?
in addressing the neurochemistry and even working with the PTSD from a biophysical level is much easier than the psychiatric medications.
Okay.
You know, that we get. Now,
Yeah.
obviously I'm a bit prejudiced, I'm a bit skewed. I don't have people calling me saying, hey, I'm stuck on my antidepressant, you know, when they're not, when they can get off of it easy.
Sure.
So the opiates, tuning up the physiology to where those people feel normal, then they can work through the trauma or whatever else.
Yeah.
In 2 weeks, they're like, woohoo! I love this place.
So the opiates are actually easier
Oh
to
my
say.
God.
Well, and I suppose that there's also that.
Some people don't even feel the pain.
Well, there's also a mental health issue. Again, there's some people who have experiences that lead to a lot of mental suffering, and then that gets misdiagnosed as, you know, kind of a mental illness, and they are told it's biochemical or genetic or a brain disease. And so they go on meds, and they don't do any actual treatment. And then when those meds get lifted, not only do they have the rebound syndrome and the up and down regulation of your, you know, pre and postsynaptic nerve, but now they still have that mental health issue, that experience that they've never dealt with, that they still have to. So now you're dealing with two things which make it super worse. And a lot of what you've recognized, and I know we talked briefly before this, is talking about what I do in court sometimes, is talk about that there's people who are being treated for mental health disorders who really have biological disorders. Like, I'm talking about mainstream disorders like thyroidism and stuff like that, that are misdiagnosed. They just never looked for it because it was so simple to call it psychiatric. And when you look at the research, and you can go to my website, again, drtobywatson.com, and I even have that up there. There's studies out there again and again that show if you just go into a psychiatric ward or a psychiatric hospital or, you know, a clinic, and you just grab a random sample of patients and you pull them out and do a whole host of medical tests, a bunch of them, you find that about 16% of them, 17% of them, have actual medical conditions that when they treated it then, the psychiatric symptom went away or significantly got so much better that it was needed to be treated, which tells us that about 1 out of every 5 or 6 people who are currently being treated, just mainstream, actually have medical conditions that should be treated. And that's not even including your group, which they're probably not even testing for on that level, I'm guessing, because you're really able to dive in, I think, at a deeper level medically than what some of these other doctors are doing. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a vague definition of what is a mental illness, what is a medical illness. Like
So if you were going to tell a patient, or a client I should say, you know, I don't always like the word patient, but I say the word patient only because of the original meaning is a petitia, which means waiting to be well. So when I use the word patient, it's actually an old Latin term meaning waiting to be well. And so that's what I mean, people just kind of waiting to be well, not medically. So if you were to look at the camera and talk to somebody out there suffering, what would you want to tell them that is a possible reason why it might be happening, and what would you want to rule out for them?
That's about as infinite as how many different types of cars there are. You know, you can't just say, oh, this is the thing you do for you. But there is a differential diagnosis. It's kind of top tier. Are you suffering all of the time, or are you suffering some of the time? The constant dispositions tend to, by and large, have more of a biological basis to them. That's based in environmental toxicity. So if someone is revved up all the time, they feel like their nervous system is standing in the middle of a freeway the whole time. This is different than someone who's, you know, sweating because they're on camera, or someone who's
like all of us right now.
Or someone who's having a blood sugar problem. Or someone who's having interdosing withdrawal because their Xanax isn't actually carrying them 24 hours.
Okay.
All of those things that have a variable disposition have more predictable and more easily sussed out mechanisms that you can solve. But someone who's suffering all the time, that's a little bit more sticky. And by and large, you're looking at neurotoxic poisoning. And those folks, those are the ones that suffer for years, you know, and it is every little chip away, because it's kind of like if we were playing catch, you know, and I'm a pitcher, and I can pitch a 100-mile-an-hour fastball, and you don't have a glove.
Yeah.
So now,
which, by the way, I don't pitch and I don't play fall very well. So.
But in this analogy, like if your nervous system's throwing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs, you're gonna have to have a glove.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's gonna hurt. You
Yeah.
catch one or two of those, and you're gonna be like, ouch.
Yeah.
And that's where the drugs come in. A person's like trying to soften the environmental toxicity, the excitotoxins, the things that have their nervous system pinned where it can't self-regulate.
Okay.
And that's what things like pesticides do. They actually kill a pest by knocking out its nervous system, overstimulating the pest to death. We use the same acetylcholine, we use the same neurotransmitters as insects. And some people have the genetic mechanisms, because we have livers. I don't actually know if a grasshopper has a liver or not, but we have a better ability to be able to detoxify that if we're capable, if we have the detoxification genetics, what they call genetic polymorphisms.
Okay.
If you've got a bad hand, you can't break that stuff down, it can accumulate and cause these dispositions where you just can't regulate.
Yeah.
For those people, getting off the medications chip by chip by chip by chip is going to be much like chipping away that glove and making it thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner.
Right.
Eventually, that ball's going to hurt.
Yeah.
And people do it over 2 years and they eat a good diet and they're slowly detoxifying things. But there's ways to get those poisons out in a quicker way.
Do you think it's getting better? And I would ask Angela, you as well. Do you think it's getting better? Do you think people are starting to realize, like, hey, we are what we eat, we are what we put in our bodies, and we've got to be very careful about, again, when we're using artificial substances, whether it be food or drugs for that matter. Do you think people are starting to get that and it's kind of swinging the other way?
Well, I think people are kind of sick of the current mental health care system. Like, it's if these treatments are so great and if the meds are so great, why is our suicide rate so high?
That's
why
right.
is mental illness disability so high?
That's true.
It should be going the other direction.
Yeah, we spend bar none more than, like, I think the next 4 countries combined that are developed and yet UNICEF a number of years ago came out, said that we were ranked 28th, I think, on a scale of 30 top countries. We were ranked 28th at the bottom for children's mental health. And I was like, Nigeria and other countries were doing better than what we were doing. And I was like, how's that possible?
So I think people, at least people that I meet on the community screenings, they're just fed up.
Yeah.
And they try medicine and they do that. And like me, I was on a hamster wheel for 13 years. Like, that doesn't work, try this one. That didn't work, try this one.
Yeah.
That you just at a certain point get sick of the hamster wheel and you look for alternatives.
Yeah.
So they offer alternatives.
Yeah. Well, and it's wonderful that you're doing this kind of work. And I imagine the people that do find you, they've probably been through the ringer, I'm guessing a while. They've been through like mainstream, they've been through some other maybe alternative, and they just haven't found something that really kind of works and sticks. So they come here, and it's a residential facility. So they come, they live on site. You work with them. You basically, you're doing certain types of sauna. You're doing certain types of IVs. You're doing certain types of nutrition. You're watching kind of everything. You're doing adjunct. There's exercise things that I've seen here at your facility. So you're kind of a rat type program. It sounds like.
The advantage to having a residential center, like I have been lured into doing outpatient care a few times, by very high profile type families, and it's just I'm not being met with the amount of success that I want, because there's so many variables about what's happening in that person's life at home. Unless I go live with them in their home for a couple of weeks, and we're actually thinking about doing these in-home health invasions where we show up at people's houses and we
health invasion. In my world, we call it in vivo work, but invasion works too.
Where we just basically tip over the refrigerator. And
I like that. Instead of like super nanny, it's gonna be like super Lyle.
It's like vigilante mental health.
Yeah, vigilante.
Kind of, yeah. We're gonna have our little toxin sniffing dog,
Yeah, I'm thinking we're doing super nanny, but it's gonna be super Lyle. That's it. We're gonna get a T-shirt that says super Lyle on it. Just boom, off and you go.
I've done a lot of work to make sure this movement's not about me at Alternative.
Yeah.
I got stunned. I got put into. Medically, in the first 200 people, we checked to see how many people had hypoglycemia.
Okay.
A type of hypoglycemia called reactive hypoglycemia that you don't see in the fasting. You see it in a 6-hour glucose tolerance test.
Okay.
It's very brutal.
Yeah.
But we did that for the first 200 people, and we found that 74, 75, almost % of the people had that situation.
Wow.
So you just take that and and it can amplify any. It's like adding a screech level to a spiritual crisis or some situation at the house, a domestic issue. Can just ramp that up. So about 75% of people are ending up in a psychiatrist's or in a mental health institution because of blood sugar. And that was me. I got completely taken out from to that. And
But it's it's becoming what we call, like you're saying, alternative to mental health. This is the idea, but it really isn't. A lot of it's very fundamental that we recognized for thousands of years. When you put things in your body, it's going to have an effect on how you feel. And when you do go through extreme situations, we don't pathologize. We used to go to the elders, in a circle, around a campfire, and people would learn from the elders what to do to heal and to get better. And we've kind of lost that. So really, I know the field of psychiatry has been around, call it maybe 100 years. Freud was back in 1900 and, was using cocaine and stuff. But we're really only in the last, since the 1950s, really zeroed in on using drugs, pharmaceutical drugs that we've created to really alter and just kind of negate those feelings. And so it really is much different. Even the Veterans Administration now, I know, has been doing a lot of different adjunct kind of therapies. And they're starting to steer away from some of the psychotropic meds. They're doing things like yoga and exercise, massage therapy, and a whole host of other things. And they're funding it. And they're finding that, hey, we're getting better success rates over the long term for these people to doing that. So, Alternative Med Center, at some point you may have to just, change your name to say fundamental treatment.
I didn't like the word alternative in the first place because we're not the alternative. I mean, the alternative is drugging, and like you said,
that's right.
I've had my ass handed to me so many times that it would be unwise for me to be too overly opinionated. But there are people that have a better quality of life, because they're having seizures or whatever. I mean, but the drug should be an alternative, not the other way around.
Right.
And what we're actually trying to prove now, we've already proven up to an 87.5% long-term success rate with the benzo class, and our lowest class of drugs was a 75% coming off antipsychotics long-term. We're talking after 4 years.
Yeah.
And we weren't even trying to get everyone off of antipsychotics in the short duration of time we have, because it would be you could have consequences that were even worse than them being on the medication. So,
one thing I wanted to ask you, because I heard a little bug in my ear, because I know somebody that kind of knows you, and who does a lot of work with something called open dialogue approach, which if you haven't looked up open dialogue approach, and this is related to people who struggle with psychosis, what we call schizophrenia or bipolar illness with psychosis. But, it's kind of making its way around the world, really, because it wasn't really developed here in the United States. It was actually Dutch, how do you say it? Dutch land, Finland? Dutch lap, Finland? Lapland. There we go.
Yeah.
Finland. We're going to go with Finland.
There you go.
And he's gotten a lot of notoriety for it because of the success rate, where people are actually, again, recovering. We're talking like 80% of people diagnosed first episode psychosis and above not having symptoms afterwards. Whereas here in our, again, westernized world, if you're diagnosed with a psychotic disorder, you get about a third that does relatively well on psychotropic meds, antipsychotics. You get about another third that does, okay, and then a third that does absolutely horrible. And the recovery rate is almost non-existent when you're talking, med approach, if they're going through the mainstream and they're just abruptly terminating because they rebound. But over there, they're finding success rates of above 80%, and it's long-term. So, the little ear or bug that I had said that you guys might even be considering adding something like that, or at least having discussions about how you already are doing something like open dialogue approach, or adding something like that. Is there some thought about that?
Yeah, and I'll tailor what I was going to say and bring it into that. So I'll segue off a little bit, but we did prove that people can come to a residential center and get off the meds and do holistic things and do well. But what we're really wanting to prove is what can you do at home? We don't want anyone to have to depend on a center, to depend on us. We want to so the three main things are, have faith in your refrigerator and what you put in it. Go exercise, move your body, and surround yourself with good people. I mean, I don't know if this was actually true what Freud said, but if you're feeling depressed or you're feeling out of sorts, check your surroundings and see if you're surrounded by assholes. I mean, if you can get good people in your life to give you good advice, a good therapist, someone to reflect back to you, those are the three main components.
Right.
Try that stuff. So that's the point of doing the in-home health invasion thing, is to try to bring this to the mat in people's communities.
Okay.
But when we did the outcome studies, and I actually was surprised they came out that high, because we do good work here, but it's what happens to people when they get home. And it's a dangerous world out there. So we want to have the open dialogue to be able to talk to the families. Yeah. Because let's say you're financed by your parents, and you were psychotic and basically terrorizing your parents, and they sent you to us. And you say, well, I want this path, and your parents want a different path. And in a residential mental health center, typically it's like you're sort of cut off from the family. You're in this lockdown situation, and they bubble whatever they bubble at you, and then they send you home. And are you fixed by the definition of who financed your treatment, or who the stakeholders are in your family?
Sure.
Do you all agree?
Yeah.
So if there's a disparity there, and they have no reference point, even if you got better, even if you got better, they still may be treating you as disabled. So we want to bring the families in.
Yeah.
Bring the people in, the probation officer, whoever has a stake in that person's care, and get them all talking.
Which is part of that open dialogue approach, where you're bringing in the network of the people for the person who's struggling. Whoever's willing to show up to the table, they come to the table, they all have a voice, and there's not a hierarchy of voice, but the person, often they call the patient, but the individual struggling has an equal voice, and they matter, and they realize it very quickly that they matter, and they have a lot of input. So it's not always that the psychiatrist, which is typical, gets to dictate to the social workers, to the case managers, to the patient, to the psychologist, to everybody, here's what we're going to do, here's the meds. And unfortunately, I know I've seen this in the clinical practice, and again, I was the chief psychologist of a prison as well, and a training coordinator for the state. I've seen this happen over and over again, where, I don't want to say we eat the leftovers, but unfortunately what they do can interrupt what I do. For me, I see a symptom, a thought, a feeling, or behavior as like a lighthouse, a beacon of some sort, where the individual struggling needs a symptom. They need something to be upset about or sad about. And so when I start talking to them and they also express that, to me that's like, oh, I'm getting close to something. That's where we need to kind of like do a little more exploratory work and talk and maybe do some kind of restructuring or some skill development. But if they're taking a med that just numbs them and they become zombied-like out, which is words that they use, the problem is that I never get to see that, and I don't really have anything to work with. That's a problem. I need those symptoms. I need the thoughts, the feelings, the behavior, the psychosis in order to know whether my intervention is working. And the problem is that if I do an intervention, I can track if there's no meds. If there's meds constantly up and down and changing, I don't know whether or not the intervention is me, is it the medication, is it some third variable? So I want to reduce and get rid of the muddy water and have as clean as a slate as possible, to do that. And I think that it's important that we have psychiatrists as a tool, but they really shouldn't be running the show. I think they should be one of the adjuncts that we have. And I think that the patient needs to be in charge, the family needs to be in charge. They need to say, we're going to do this, we're going to add this, we're going to do this, and oh yeah, we can do some meds, but the medication and the psychiatrist doesn't run the show, and they don't dictate it. So I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate both of you being here. It was a great discussion. I'm glad that we're doing this work. Please let our audience know one more time, where can they reach out to you and get in contact with you and order to support the cause?
www.medicatingnormal.com or any of the social media platforms just by searching Medicating Normal.
And then likewise, Lyle, where can they find you at and reach out to you if they want to find more about the service and that?
Well, it's called Alternative to Med Center. So alternativetomeds.com would be the URL. And there's actually a lot of information on there. We have a Facebook page as well, so that's where you can find us.
Wonderful, guys. Thank you again so much for joining me for the Dr. Toby Out On Call. Each week I'm going to be coming to you, and we're going to start coming live every week, typically on Thursdays afternoon. And look for it. Please click like us, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and I guess that's going to be it, guys. So thank you so much.